gums at each other any chance they get. The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo. One of the greatest knockouts you'll ever see! It's time!
For you to sit back, relax, and listen to a complete and fucking utter armchair expert give his completely and utterly useless opinions on the one hell of an amazing sport that is MMA.
G'day, guys. So here it is. We are at the end of 2024, and what a jam-packed year it was for MMA. So I just thought I'd do a quick little recap episode to finish what was one hell of a year off, and maybe also talk about something else that's come up in the last week or two at the end of the podcast. But of course, we started off the year in January, which wasn't a good month for me because it was the month I was losing my local pub, which I'd watched a lot of these events in. We started off the year with what was a very long card, to be honest. UFC 297, I think it finished at like 5 p.m. or something like that. Yeah, very long card indeed. And it had, of course, which was really, truth be told, the only fight that I actually wanted to see on it. Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis on it, which was a very close fight, which I still believe Sean won. But anyway, DDP, looking like GSP did after the Johnny Hendricks fight, somehow took the belt. And has reigned with it ever since. Controversial decision that was, but in February we had UFC 298, and this one still hits a nerve, to be honest, because that was the card where Volk lost his long-held featherweight title to current 145-pound champion Ilia Topuria, who will come up again later in this podcast. I remember, to be honest with you, I didn't even see it really. I did see it. I was watching it, but I was sort of distracted for a minute looking at something else, and then I heard the bar erupt, and next thing I knew, Volk was on the ground and Ilia TKO'd him, I believe. Of course, this was on the heels, I think, 4 cards out of Volk fighting Islam a second time in Abu Dhabi, I believe it was. And I still say to the on short notice, by the way, because I think from memory, for whatever reason, Charles couldn't fight, and they had Volk step in as a replacement on like 11 days' notice. I still say, looking back now in hindsight, that was probably a mistake, because that was also a TKO in the first round, and who knows what that might have done to his chin, especially in the lead up to fighting someone like Ilia, who, as much as I dislike, and I do dislike him, I think he's a schmuck, frankly, as a person. He is a good fighter, I'll give him that. And of course, like I said, he'll come up again in this podcast later on, but yeah, that is still definitely a sore spot. So then, of course, we had UFC 299, and I'll have to just get a refresher as to what happened there. Give me 1 second. UFC 299. Oh, yes. So Sean O'Malley defended his belt against Marlon Vera. That's right. And Dustin Poirier got a win as well. Oh, yes. And the I think it was MVP's debut. I could be wrong, but I think it was MVP's debut fight. Yeah, no, not much else to say about that. Sean O'Malley has his reign continue, and he'll again come up later in this podcast. But then in April this year, we had the long-awaited UFC 300, and while it was probably a little bit, lack of star study. We thought they might bring Conor back for it. We thought, so on and so forth. It definitely delivered. It had the awesome knockout and really domination of Justin Gaethje by who had been on a tear at that point, don't forget, by Max Holloway for the BMF title. Knocked him out with 1 second to go of the 5th round. Oh man, I'll never forget standing up from my seat at the bar over that one. Man, that was just that's gonna go down in folklore, that fight, really. I believe it's not only knockout of the year but fight of the year because of the previous 4 rounds to that. And yeah, man, that like someone said on Twitter, I believe it was, these are the nights that us MMA fans live for, and absolutely it was. Of course, we also had Alex Pereira defend his belt against Jamal Hill in a quick knockout, I believe it was, as has become a custom for Poatan fights, and again, he'll come up later in this podcast. But yeah, man, that fight single-handedly made UFC 300 one of the best cards ever, I think. Definitely in my top 10 KOs and even fights of all time. Yeah, man, I'm never going to forget seeing that one. Far out. Jesus. Crazy that it's going to be coming up to a year soon since that fight happened. So then we had UFC 301. Not much happened there, I believe. I'll get a refresher. Hold on. 301. Yeah, Alexandre Pantoja, I believe, either won or defended his belt. I can't remember. And Jose Aldo returned, I guess, after, UFC 300. We had to expect maybe a bit of a lackluster card after that. So that was in May, I believe, or could have even been at the end of April. Hold on. When actually was that card? It was early May. Okay, cool. So then we get to June with UFC 302. Hold on, I'll just look it up so I know what else happened, because I know there was more than one fight I want to talk about on there. Hold on. Hang on a sec. Oh, yes. So, yeah, there's 2 fights I want to talk about in this card. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Number one, this was when I think everyone knew that Izzy versus DDP was going to happen, and it eventually did. But 2, Strickland copped a lot of crap for this fight. Definitely. So yeah, it was pretty lackluster. It went the distance, I believe. yeah, it sort of wasn't really all that entertaining, unfortunately. But yeah, but of course we had Dustin Poirier go up against Islam Makhachev, who defended his belt by, I believe, submission. Yep. Went the distance pretty much, but it ended up being a submission. Dustin showed his, or the Diamond as I call him, showed his trademark heart, stayed in there till the end pretty much, but got submitted by Islam and gave that amazing speech at the end where I think everyone thought it was going to be his last fight. As it turns out, it might not be, but I guess we'll find out more about that. But then we had UFC 303 in June, I believe, which was supposed to be the return of Conor McGregor up for the first time in 2 years against Michael Chandler, the tough fight. But I believe it was 2 weeks or so out. There were rumblings for weeks. There was supposed to be an Ireland press conference, but that got cancelled. And basically from that point on, there were rumblings that Conor's not going to be able to fight. And it turned out to be true. And Potan, being Potan, came in on short notice and fought Jamal Hill a second time. That's bloody 2 cards he's saved now, 2 big cards. And I'll never bloody forget that stare down. And the knockout. Oh my God, that was brutal. Yeah, but yeah, they had a long ass stare down before the start of the fight, like a minute-long stare down, before I think Bruce Buffer even announced him. Like, yeah, that was. I think I'll have to go back and look it up again. Hold on. I'm fairly certain. Let's go back. Fuck off. Go back. Hold on, I can't go back for whatever reason to Google. Oh, UFC 303. Yeah, so Pereira Prohaska, as I talked about. I'm almost sure. Yep. Oh, yes. So, yes, MVP was on this card and he fought Ian Mercado Gary. I remember that. Went the bloody distance like all Ian Mercado Gary fights do. But, yeah, pretty interesting card overall. Can't really complain with it. So then we had UFC 304 where Leon Edwards lost his belt to Bilal Muhammad, and Tom Aspinall was forced to defend his interim heavyweight championship again, as ridiculous as that was. And of course, Paddy Pimblett fought on, I believe it was the same, or maybe I'm thinking of another one. It was the same card as his partner, I believe. God, I forget her name. But yeah, it was in Manchester this time, which was interesting, in England. So that was interesting. But then we had UFC 305 back in Perth, the land down under, for the long-awaited showdown between Israel, the last style bender Adesanya, and Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight championship. Of course, their beef stemmed back to UFC 290, where Izzy got in the cage and started shouting the N-word at bloody Dricus du Plessis after he beat Robert Whittaker and became the #1 contender for the belt. But yeah, that was, I don't know I can't remember what else is on that card. Hold on. All I remember is that fight. There you go. Yeah, DDP. Oh yeah, Kai Kara France on the card against Steve Erceg, Dan Hooker. Oh yeah. Oh, and bloody Bam Bam Tuivasa lost again to Jarinzo Rosenstreich. God. As always, I get the bloody pronunciation wrong on all these bloody fighters' names. But, yeah, I always love the down under cards. Of course, once again, I wasn't able to go to it because it wasn't in Melbourne. But anyway, then we had UFC 306, which was the Sphere card. And what an event that was. Just, you could see where all the money went. But we finally got Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez, which was supposed to be on UFC 303, but was cancelled. Diego Lopez beat Brian Ortega. Valentina beat Alexa Grasso for the flyweight championship. I believe she either defended it or won it back. I can't remember. But the reign of Sugar Sean O'Malley lost his belt to Merab pronunciation again. Oh, God. But yeah, his reign ended, and I think, like Colby Covington, he came out and said some controversial things after it. But that was the Sphere card. And then we had UFC 307. Oh, yes. Pereira versus Roundtree Jr., Khalil Roundtree Jr., and of course, Poatan being Poatan, he defended his belt. But I do remember it being actually a better fight than most. Khalil Roundtree, he's one tough motherfucker. He took a pounding from Alex Pereira, had to go to hospital after it, but he stayed there until the 4th round. I was fully expecting it to be a 1 or 2 round deal, but he managed to stay in there and fight his heart out against arguably the guy who's shaping up to be the runner-up to the GOAT at light heavyweight, really. He's carving himself up a very nice legacy, Alex Pereira. But Juliana Pena, I believe, won the bantamweight title back or defended it. I can't remember. But, of course, we had Jose Aldo, the King of Rio, back on the card again, and he lost a controversial decision, actually, from what I remember, because it went the distance. And I think everyone thought Aldo won, but the other guy got it somehow. And I do remember that being a pretty controversial decision. But then we had UFC 308, the card that I had to get up early for and actually recorded the podcast as it was going, where we saw Max Blessed Holloway go up against Ilia Topuria for the 155 division belt. And, of course, I'd have to look it up to find out the round. I know it was early on. I don't think it went full distance. Oh, yeah, it was the 3rd round. Ilia got him, and I was so pissed off because I literally brought the pay-per-view and got up early for it, and that was the ending. And also, Magomed Ankalaev, who a lot of people reckon should be the next contender to Alex Pereira at light heavyweight, got the win. And also, Khamzat Chimaev fought Robert Whittaker in what was a long-awaited fight and just, I'm pretty sure, broke his jaw, like submitted him dominantly in the 1st round. And yeah, that one was quite scary. Of course, I was rooting for Bobby Knuckles because I was hoping he'd be able to potentially get back up into contender status, or at least maybe get another fight with Izzy or something to get into contender status, but probably wasn't to be. So that was another bit of a sad card for me. But then we had UFC 309, where we finally got the long-awaited heavyweight bout between John Bones Jones and Stipe Miocic, and Stipe basically proved everyone right. He should not have been in there. I'll say this, he did. There were a couple of moments where it looked like he might have had Jones and exposed maybe some holes in his game, but Jones was just, as always, a step ahead and got him in the third round with a spinning back kick to his ribs and just TKO'd him. And Stipe, of course, retired not long after. But we also had a lightweight bout between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler, the rematch. And I don't know if it was the time off, waiting for the Conor fight, or what, but man, Chandler looked horrible in there. Jesus Christ. Charles won it with ease. Like everyone knew he'd won. So he'll be going back up against Islam, you would think, probably after that. But then we had to end the year off in December, UFC 310, which wasn't really a stacked card. Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. Cyril Gane won that. Shavkat Rakhmonov beat Ian Mikado Gary in what was a pretty decent fight, actually. It went the distance, but I'll say that. It was a pretty decent fight by Mikado Gary standards, but then Alexandre Pantoja defended his belt. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up a pretty big year for MMA in 2024. What a year it's been. And I look forward to 2025. Of course, we're going to see the rematch between DDP and Sean Strickland in Australia, ironically, in Sydney. Again, not going to be able to go to it. And I'm a little bit sad that because I think, I could be wrong, but I think Wei Lee is fighting in the co-main event, which on any other I'd be excited about, but I'm kind of sad that it's no Aussie fighters in the main or co-main event, which is what I always love with Aussie cards. But what a year 2024 has been, and I cannot wait for 2025. So been talking for 22 minutes now, or actually probably a bit less because of the intro, but gonna take a break, and when I come back, gonna just talk about one other topic that's come up in the last week or so before we end off the podcast and the year. All that and more when I come back. So I just wanted to finish the podcast off by discussing one other thing that has come up. It relates to Conor McGregor. There is rumors going around that he may face Logan Paul in a boxing match in India. So let's talk about that. Do I think it'll happen? Maybe, because it's Conor McGregor, and you know, India has never really been a big fight, capital. So I guess they want to maybe invest in it and get it started. It's being funded allegedly by the Ambani family, which is worth billions of dollars. And they're allegedly gonna pay Conor $250 million to get into the ring with Logan Paul. So best believe that's going to entice him, especially given the run of luck he's had lately with businesses and sponsorships and all that sort of stuff. And Logan Paul, he'll do anything to box Conor McGregor. Sorry about that. And have that on his resume, especially given he's been in the ring with Floyd Mayweather. So that would be just a perfect tying of the knot, wouldn't it? Given, Conor and Floyd also fought in another very big paying box office breaking records bout. Or record breaking bout. Sorry, that makes more sense. But yeah, look, Do I see it happening? Probably, to be honest, because for Conor, it's a money maker, which he's wanted for a while. It's a money maker, which he's wanted for a while. Before he goes back to the octagon, and like I said, Logan would just do anything to have Conor on his resume. Once upon a time, this would have been damn near impossible to do, but of course, as we know, the UFC and the WWE are under the same umbrella now. Logan is signed to the WWE and Conor's signed to the UFC, so maybe they decide that it's in the mutual best interest of all of them and let the bout go ahead. Who knows? So it could well happen, and it'll be interesting and a chance for me to finally talk about Conor in an actual fight on this podcast, because as we know, I've talked about him a lot, but not in an actual fight. But anyway, just wanted to address that, before it's actually signed or whatever. And this was the only opportunity I was going to get to do it. But anyway, guys, what a year 2024 was. Happy New Year to all of you, however you end up celebrating it. And let's all look forward to a jam-packed 2025 once again for MMA events. Now, till next time, as always, catches.